Devil in the Woods, written by Aetherisu. I sit here in a dingy hotel next to a dead town. My shotgun is loaded and I'm strapped with gasoline, ready to head back into battle. The one true battle I've been needing to fight. As I wait for nightfall, I want to tell you how I got here and why I need to do this. As a child, I lived next to a large forest. It was a huge expanse of woods that contained the town in its green embrace. My house was on the outskirts of town, and my backyard was extremely close to where the woods began. I would walk through there during the day often, exploring the trails with friends or just playing near the edge of the yard. I never thought that I would be afraid of the forest. It had a strange vibe, like it held dark secrets, but that didn't alarm me when I was a child. My mom, however, she was very afraid of what she witnessed. One day, I came home from school very tired, so I immediately went upstairs intending to head to bed, forgetting to tell my parents that I was home. When I reached the top of the stairs, I could hear what sounded like my mom having a full-blown breakdown in her bedroom. The door was standing open, just enough to peek through. I crept up to the door and looked through the crack. I saw my mom facing away from the door, sitting on the bed. My dad was next to her. She was weeping and shaking, and when she spoke with terror in her throat. It was truly hard to hear, but I could just about make out what she was saying. I saw something in the forest last night. I woke up dazed. It was late, and outside our window I could hear what sounded like gagging. A low, guttural cough, followed then by a loud sucking, slurping sound. Like when you suck a straw to get the last drops from a drink. I got to the window with the understanding that it was probably an animal choking on its food. So I looked out the window towards the forest. It took a while, but I eventually saw where the noise was coming from. I could see a rough figure crouching low, then two small glowing red lights in the darkness. They were not moving, so I assumed it could have been an object reflecting light from the moon. It was only when I saw them blink that I knew that they were eyes, and that they were looking right at me. That did shake me up a bit, but the horror sank in when the creatures started to come out of the woods, crawling on all fours into our lawn. It was heading straight for our porch doors below. Its goal was to get inside our house. I was going to wake you up, but the creature stopped crawling. Then it started walking. It was huge. It must have been at least 7 feet tall, and was bony. So bony, like a walking skeleton. It walked slowly to not make much noise. At this point, all I could make out was a shadow. I wished it would have stayed that way. But when the thing got close to the doors, the back door light sprang online, lighting up the whole backyard, including this lumbering monstrosity. I caught maybe 2 seconds in total before it sprinted back into the forest. What I saw was unspeakably horrific. It had a nasty, inhuman face. It was like a skull, and its eyes were just black circles with red pupils. It had a huge set of exposed teeth that looked like daggers, no lips, just teeth, and there must have been 50 teeth on top and bottom to complete its mouth. A gray, wrinkly, hairless skin was covering its bones like a plastic wrapper. It raised its huge arms quickly to shield its face from the light, and then ran into the darkness of the forest. Last night I struggled to sleep, but when I did, I was invaded by horrible nightmares of this creature, its dead, blank gray face with its nasty exposed teeth. watching our house with its malicious intentions, waiting for a good time to strike. This morning when I woke up, I went straight out into the garden to check if anything was left behind so that I could prove to you that it was real. And what I found made my head spin. The light that sprang to life has a nasty big crack over the screen, which I'm sure is new. Luckily, the light is still working, but just barely. Now, my father is a scientific guy, and he doesn't believe in things like the paranormal or monsters. He prefers rational thinking, and to him, these things were virtually impossible to be comprehended. Sarah, you probably just had a bad dream. Remember, you used to tell me that you had them a lot as a child. Maybe it was just that. He said that with confidence, like he had just rationalized the impossible. She shot him a stern look and fired back a response. I never used to dream up monsters, and I've never dreamed up something so vivid. She was then cut off abruptly. I accidentally moved the door forward with my knee, causing them both to turn with speed and shock. My father immediately sighed when he saw me. Andy, by God, you scared us. When did you get home? I lied to them and said that it was just a minute ago. They both looked at each other, pleased that I may not have overheard their hidden chat. My father turned to my mother and quickly said, Let's talk later in bed. We don't want Andy overhearing this. It might scare him. Truth be told, I was terrified already, and I regretted overhearing the nightmarish story. I did end up heading to my room after that, but I couldn't sleep in the end, and I was no longer tired. Thoughts plagued my mind all day. Could Mom be telling the truth? Surely such a horrid creature just didn't exist. I had to find out for myself if this creature was real. I waited until the dead of night and I crept downstairs towards the back doors. To my surprise, my mother was already there, peering outside. She was awfully pale. I said in a quiet voice as I came down the stairs, Mom, what are you doing up? I startled her by saying this. She turned around to face me. From her facial expression, I could tell that she was angry. Andy, she said in one of those loud but hushed tones. Just enough to let anger out, but not enough to wake anyone. I could ask the same of you, she said in an urgent voice this time. I looked at her with regret, guilt on my face. I overheard your story, Mom. I came home earlier than I said and I heard pretty much the whole thing. Surely that thing that you saw isn't real, right? It can't be, I said, but I knew the truth. I could tell by the terror in my mother's voice when she told the story that she had seen something nasty. You shouldn't have. It was an adult conversation and you were too young to hear those things. Now, go back to bed. I outright refused, and she was shocked at my rudeness. I told her that I would feel better if I stood with her and saw for myself if it was real. Otherwise, I would be up all night. She sighed heavily and said fine. I walked over and stood next to her while she was looking out from the glass doors into the deep forest beyond our lawn. We watched all night together, but nothing appeared, and we both went to bed feeling a little easier. That the thing may have just been a dream after all. A few days passed at this point, and though the story stuck in the back of my mind, I started to play outside on the lawn out back, and I even walked the trails with my friends a few times. I felt at ease with it all, and I lived on. Then my world flipped back upside down, and the freedom was soon taken back from me. It was a beautiful summer evening. The sun was just setting, and we had people over for a big barbecue. I mostly played with friends outside all evening. It was so peaceful, my mother and father had just finished cleaning up and they told me to come back inside as it was getting dark. I asked for just 10 minutes as I was practicing kick-ups and was so close to getting 100 in a row. They agreed and went back inside. They would normally close the doors to stop flies from getting in, but this time my mother insisted the door was left open just in case. I heard rustling from a nearby bush behind me and it caused me to stop going for my goal. My heart was beating fast and visions of this monster flooded my mind, but like a curious, naive child, I walked towards it. On the ground, just beyond the brush, was a dead carcass. It was mangled by something brutally. It was lying on its side, its face was smashed in, and its guts were spewed all over the forest floor like red ribbons. It looked like a scene from an animal documentary where the predator had tucked into its prey and shredded them to pieces. Everything that you could see was red with blood. I stood and stared until something extremely strong grabbed my ankle and pulled. I screamed bloody murder instantly, and I was dragged with force through the bush in front of me. All I could see was undergrowth, and I could feel it shredding my clothes and skin like cheese on a grater. I could hear shouting in the background and an awful scream, followed by a horrid guttural snarl. I had just come out the other end of the bush when, to my surprise, the thing had let go. I could finally see the vivid, peaceful sky again. Sitting up and looking straight ahead, I could see what dragged me running off into the forest, and my mom was right. It was a horrid creature. Absolutely massive, gray, and extremely bony, like it was anorexic. It was running on all fours like a panther, and before I knew it, it had disappeared into the darkness of the forest. The background noise that I had heard earlier was from my parents, and they had come over immediately to help me get back up off the damp woodland floor. My mother immediately grabbed me and held me close to her. She moved back for a second to assess the damage I had taken. It was funny because at the moment I couldn't feel anything. But when I looked in the mirror after the incident, the cuts, scrapes, and bruises were quite shocking. However, there was nothing more painful than the mark on my ankle where the thing had grabbed me. It was completely swollen and extremely hard to walk on. Suffice it to say, she was shocked and started crying at the state of me. She then hugged me close again, and I heard her say in a dazed state to my dad, "Did you see that thing, Fred? I told you that it was real," she said with serious panic in her voice. "I did, but it just looked like an animal to me, maybe a large bear. I don't know, but it was something big," my dad said. Doubt started to creep into his rational thinking. "Oh, come on, it grabbed our child with such force it dragged him through this massive bush. How can an animal do that?" She couldn't believe that he was still doubting her. "There are animals that can," he said with a deflated ego, and with that, we headed inside, shaken and afraid of what was to come from all of this. Weeks went by again, this time with more fear than the last, and the thoughts were stronger. I barely went outside, and I certainly avoided the forest. I stayed off school for a few days to let my wounds heal. On the bus home from school when I recovered, my friend Ted asked me if I wanted to walk the trail after school. It was a lovely day, but of course I refused. However, my friend had already made up his mind as he was going walking on the trail, even if that meant that he was going to do it on his own. He had done this quite a few times, so to him it would be nothing out of the usual. But he did not realize that the forest was changing. It had released something extremely dangerous. I warned him immediately about what I had seen and what had happened to me, but I fear that this just piqued his interest and made him want to go hunt for it. All of my best efforts failed to dissuade him, and he did go that evening out onto the trail. He never came back, and the guilt I still feel to this day eats me up inside. I should have agreed. Maybe we stood a chance together. But fear was controlling me, and there was no way I was going to step back into that forest. I told Mom straight away where he was going when I got home from school, but his bus dropped him off quite a few minutes before my stop, so when she called his parents, they said that he had already headed out. It's weird because Mom and I looked at each other after that call like we had just been given the news that a loved one had died. I can only imagine what could have befallen him when he walked the trail for the last time. That night was tough. The guilt I felt was so strong that it was impossible to sleep. What made it worse was it sounded like Ted was calling my name from outside. I lay there thinking that I was dreaming, but it continued and I realized that this wasn't a horrible dream. It was a real voice. It cried, "Please, Andy, I'm scared. Let me in. Why did you not come with me? I'm so scared." I was frozen in bed as I listened to this strange voice that sounded like Ted's, but it sounded off, like something was just replicating his voice. It was belittling me, stabbing the knife of guilt further into my soul. With great hardship, I eventually gained the courage to look outside my window to see if it was him. I cried at what I saw. I may have even soiled myself in pure fear. Ted was there, but only his head as the creature was holding it in his hand by the hair like a lantern. It was truly grotesque. The sight of it alone is something that will plague even the strongest of men for eternity. To my sheer horror, it spoke to me through Ted's voice. I could see its massive set of teeth moving slightly to show it talking. After the mocking finished, it spoke in a low growl of a voice. "We will meet again soon, young one. I'm sure you'll taste just as delicious as he did." I winced in pain as my ankle started to hurt again. It felt like it was on fire, and it caused me to bend down and lift my pajama bottoms to see what was happening. Everything looked normal, aside from a large hand mark from the creature when it grabbed me. But that should be gone soon. It soon stopped quickly after examining it. I immediately looked out the window again, but this time there was nothing to greet me back. Just an empty street, fast asleep for the night. Safe to say that night I didn't sleep. How could you after seeing such a sight? For the rest of the night, I laid awake thinking about the creature and what it had said. "We will meet again soon, young one. I'm sure you'll taste as delicious as he did." Its haunting voice echoed in my brain. After a full night of thinking, I concluded, light. It's afraid of it. I thought about the time it tried to break into our house when it saw Mom. It ran from the light. It tried to break in on the same night to get in, but the light still just about worked. In the end, it saved us. I told Mom the information the next day, and she also agreed that it had to be light. That meant in the day we were safe, but at night we would need to be on guard, especially after what it had told me the night before. Mom had an idea of keeping the hallway lights on at night and, just in case, carrying flashlights on us to use if it did end up getting close. There was a knock at the door. My mom answered. It was Ted's parents, and they looked worse for wear. Ted's mom spoke in a very distraught voice, and the guilt crawled up my body and tugged at my heartstrings. "Hi, Sarah. Sorry to bother you. Have you or your son seen Ted by any chance? I noticed you called yesterday to check up on him. He walked the trail as I said on the phone, but he never came back." She started to cry at this point. I would have no idea what to say in this situation, but my mom must have thought about a response beforehand. "I'm so sorry, Carol. No, we haven't seen Ted lately. I called because Andy had changed his mind about going on the trail with him and wanted to see if he could come. I wanted to see if Ted had left so that he could join him and they could go together." It was a great response, executed perfectly. And it saved us from looking like crazy people if we had told them the truth. Some things are just better left unsaid, even though it hurt to hear such a cruel lie. I see. Well, please, if you do see him, tell him to come home straight away," Ted's mother said with heart. "Of course, Carol. Have you called the—" I stopped listening here as they started one of those adult conversations. This time, I avoided it. The night was approaching fast, and we all prepared for sleep, leaving the hallway lights on, to which Dad protested, but Mom gave him the glare, which normally meant move along before you start something that you can't finish. Mom tucked me in for the night, which comforted me. She gave me a large flashlight, and I placed it down on the bed next to me. As she was tucking me in, she said, "I've spoken to Dad. I've told him that I want to move. I don't feel safe here anymore, and I'm sure you feel the same. It's wrong. You should feel safe, and I won't have it much longer. So we're looking to move as soon as possible." I was quite shocked at what she said. I've lived here all my life, and a change like that for a child is extremely overwhelming. But I also felt relief that this nightmare might finally end. "Well, anyway, good night, sweet boy. I hope you sleep well." "Night, Mom," I said. The door was left ajar to let some light fill the room. It was comforting, and soon I fell into a deep sleep at last. Sleep didn't last too long, and when I woke it was pitch black, like I had woken up in a cave of nightmares. My ankle started to throb again violently, but that did not disturb me compared to the fact that the hallway light that was on before I went to sleep was now off. My room, which was lit before sleep from the hallway, was now engulfed in darkness. I yelled for Mom immediately, but to my growing despair, she didn't respond. Then my despair jumped off a cliff when I heard the floorboards creaking downstairs, followed by a slow, soft creaking coming up the staircase. I was stunned with fear. I could do nothing. My body and my mind were all frozen in terror. I knew it was the monster, and it must have found a way into the house, but most of the lights were on. How would that even be possible? I tried to turn on my bedside lamp, but it wouldn't. I checked the plug quickly to see if it was in, and it was. I then realized it must have turned off the power. Honestly, I could have just curled up and cried at this point, but the fear was just too strong. I had to do something. By the time that I was ready to act, it was already upon me. I heard the creaking stop, my heart pounding now as the bony gray hand wrapped around the door as to open it. The fingers were ghastly long, as were the nails that supported them, thick like daggers, and you could see dried blood covering them. "Go away, I'm warning you." I said it meekly as a child would, gripping the flashlight now as the thing came through into the room, and it was grinning with pure pleasure, teeth gleaming in the small stream of moonlight coming from the window, drool dripping all over the floor.
"You're mine this time, child. You escaped me once, but not this time. No one is here to save you. You children always are the tastiest morsels."
Thoughts then flooded my mind of poor Ted walking the trail, loving life unknown to him that he would soon become this thing's prey. This pissed me off, and everything I did after this was for Ted. I boomed, "Go away!" I grabbed my flashlight with everything I had, clicking the button and pointing it straight at the thing. It didn't work at first, and the thing dashed towards me hissing in anger. I thought I was going to die, so I shut my eyes, but with one final click, the flashlight finally burst to life, covering this beast with beautiful light. It instantly felt the effects and threw up its disgusting arms to shield itself from the glowing brilliance of the light. With that, I ran straight out of my room and to my parents' room, screaming and shouting all the way. They woke up immediately, both shocked at the chaos. My dad shot up, grabbing his pistol nearby instantly. He did not question me this time and went into the hallway. I stood there next to Mom, completely dazed in fear. I hated this night. Truly, this had to be the worst night of my life. My dad screamed at my mom and me, "Run!" The thing was now running out of the bedroom and into the hall at full speed, straight at Dad. Hands raised, claws out, and ready for battle. My dad raised the pistol and unloaded everything. All I could hear was the bangs, loud and fast, followed by a scream. I still hear that scream in my dreams, waking me up at night, like a terrible joke of an alarm clock. Sad to say, I blacked out for the rest of the night. Fear gripped me too strongly. The next thing I knew, I was in the hospital, confused and incredibly scared. But next to me was Mom, sleeping silently in a chair by my bed. Like she sensed my awakeness, she bolted from her slumber and ran to my bedside, crying with happiness. "Andy, my sweet boy, you're awake at last." She grabbed my head and held it close to her. "Mom, where am I? What happened?" I asked. "We were attacked." And with that, she began to recite what had happened last night to my absolute dismay. I hated books that ended with "it was all a dream." But at this moment, I seriously wished that that was the ending. I'm sad to say it's not. Dad is dead, Andy. He saved us. I wish he had believed us sooner. With that, she burst into tears. My ears rang for a moment, then I tuned back in and looked back at her. The words just slipped out from here. No, that can't be. He's so strong, he would have been able to beat it." My mom must have gotten word from the police that proved that he was dead. Otherwise, she would have agreed. "He's gone, son. I know it's hard to accept, but he is. Listen, we're going to get out of here as soon as possible and go and stay with your auntie. We're not safe here anymore, and I can't stand another minute in this town." She said that last bit with spite. I didn't understand at first, but later in life, she told me it was because the police did not believe her story and chalked it up to a home invader. They had similar deaths in the area like Dad's, and they thought that it was linked to a possible serial killer. Years went by, and the suicide attempts racked up. I never did end up accepting what happened as Mom wanted me to. By the time I hit 18, I was completely lost, outcast with no friends or prospects. I was not religious, but I prayed night after night for relief. And to my surprise, one day it was answered. 1 week away from the end of college, I attended a job fair as a last-ditch effort for guidance, and to my surprise, I found it. The Army. They were recruiting then and there. I spoke to one of the guys who sympathized with my story. I left out the whole monster part and said it like the police had, saving me from the shame. From there, time went fast. 3 months in, I was training. Then before I knew it, I was deployed and deep in Afghan territory. And to my relief, around our base was nothing but glorious yellow sand. The guys hated it, but to me, it was heaven as there wasn't a forest in sight. My prayers felt like they had finally been answered. I had a direction, a purpose, and in a twisted way, even though my life was actively on the line daily, I felt safe. I was finally far away from that thing, and from here I grew in strength again. To my surprise, on one day at the base, I received mail, which was normally from my mother, but not my aunt. My heart sank when I saw that it was from her. I knew something was up, and I was right. It was a very emotional letter, but the statement was that my mother had gone missing. She was walking home from work as usual to my aunt's. She was last seen next to the woods, and I effing knew that that thing had gotten her. God knows how, but I knew. I knew that somehow it had gotten her. I felt lost again, but this time I was pissed. A couple of more months went by and I was shipped back home. The boys were scared after what we had seen. Death, destruction. But no, for me it didn't faze me in the slightest. There are more disturbing entities than war, and I had seen one of them. So back to the homeland we went. And when we got back, it was time to disperse back to our family for some much-needed R&R. My aunt cried when she saw me and hugged me close. I felt emotionless, half expecting my mom to pop out as a surprise, but no, just my aunt. But at least it was someone. I asked her what she knew about my mom's disappearance. We sat drinking near her warm fireplace while she elaborated. "It's my fault. I should have written you sooner. Your mother had been acting very strange leading up to the disappearance. She said that she heard voices and saw things, but I could not confirm it myself. She was saying that the forest was calling out to her, that the beast was waiting, ready to strike at a moment's chance. The night before the event, she claimed that it got into this very house and tried to kill her, scratching at the walls and doors like a wild beast. I was out at the time, and again I saw little evidence to support what she was saying. Then that fatal night she went to work like usual, but she seemed different. She gave me a big hug and told me that she loved me and was so proud of her little sister. She has never said that before, and it took me back. I just shrugged it off to her having a good day, but now I realize she was saying goodbye. I checked my knife drawer to find one missing. If this thing is real, then she must have gone into the forest to try and fight it." The sadness I felt was immeasurable. She was crazy to do such a thing, but at the same time, it showed strength, and I now knew I had to do something. I gathered my things after she told me the story, and I left. My aunt begged me not to go, that the police would look into it, but I was fed up. I needed to do something. I grabbed the keys to my aunt's car and promised her that I would give them back to her when I was done. And with that, I left. I stopped off at a gun store and I bought a combat shotgun and shells. Then I filled up tanks with gasoline. Then, with speed and anger, I headed back to that stupid little town. So, here I sit in this hotel waiting for nightfall. Sitting in a town that is pretty much deserted except for some hardcore locals. My shotgun is loaded. I've got 2 flashlights at the ready with plenty of battery. I've got knives, a combat jacket, and most importantly, a few tanks of gasoline. Nightfall approaches. I hear a blood-curdling howl come from the woods near the hotel. The thing must know that I'm here. I must end my story here. I will kill this thing even if it means sacrificing myself. Even if it means setting the whole forest on fire. It ends here. Learn from this. Nature can be amazing and it can be beautiful, but it can also be deadly. Forests portray that contrast like no other. From afar, they look breathtaking, but within, the silence, the emptiness, and stillness hide the nightmares that we fear. My name is Andy Thompson. I wish you all the luck in the world. Thank you for hearing my story. Goodbye.